He was a former Marine sniper living off-grid in the Cascade Mountains, haunted by missions he couldn't forget. His orders were simple: monitor encrypted criminal traffic and stay invisible. But when a blizzard tore through the night, everything changed. A scratching at his door. A weak, desperate whine. When he opened it, a massive Belgian Malinois collapsed at his feet, and strapped to the dog's back was a freezing toddler, barely clinging to life. He thought it was just a rescue. He had no idea this canine was carrying a secret that would drag him into a deadly conspiracy buried deep in the snow. Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. And if courage, loyalty, and faith move your soul, hit that subscribe button, because you're about to witness a story that proves miracles don't always come from the sky. Sometimes they come on 4 frozen paws that turn subscribe to USX Stories. Snow pressed against the mountains like a white shifting wall, muting the world into a breathless hush. Inside a lone wooden cabin buried deep in Washington's Cascade Range, former Marine sniper Marcus Sullivan sat before a desk cluttered with encrypted radios, a high-gain antenna monitor, and a ruggedized laptop humming under dim amber light. At 39, Marcus carried the look of a man carved from hard years. Broad shoulders, strong posture, short dark brown hair kept in strict military regulation, and a jawline outlined by a trimmed utilitarian stubble. His eyes, steel gray and steady, held a depth that suggested discipline etched by loss rather than age. To most people, the Cascades were an empty wilderness. To him, they were a listening post. Marcus's assignment was simple in description, impossibly difficult in execution. Monitor encrypted chatter along the I-90 corridor for signs at Ghost Wire, a criminal network specializing in elderly data fraud and emergency system sabotage, was mobilizing. They had already tested false 911 rerouting in 3 counties. Someone had to catch their next move. The FBI handled the analysis. The U.S. Marshals moved the witnesses. Marcus's job was to sit alone in the cold, sift through static, and detect the faintest tremor of danger before it reached innocent people. Most Marines hated stillness. Marcus had grown used to it. Some missions strip sound away until silence becomes a kind of medicine, harsh but clarifying. He leaned back, stretching the tension from his shoulders. The cabin felt smaller tonight, the wind clawing at the shutters like an impatient visitor. The blizzard had rolled in earlier than forecast, swallowing the mountains in thick sheets of ice white. Marcus adjusted his headset, listening to the low hum of frequencies bouncing through the storm. Nothing unusual, only static, and then a sound that wasn't static at all. A bark, thin, broken, barely threading to the howl of the wind. Marcus froze, every nerve tightening with that instinct only seasoned operators possessed. Many people heard danger seconds too late. Marines heard it before it arrived. Another bark, closer, frantic. Marcus stood, grabbing his thermal jacket from the hook by the door. His movements were swift, economical, shaped by muscle memory, and missions where hesitation meant death. He opened the door. Wind slammed into him like a sheet of knives. And then he saw it. A Belgian Malinois staggered to the swirling white. It's formatted with frost, its steps lurching with the weight of something on its back. The dog collapsed onto the threshold, chest heaving, paws trembling. Strapped to its back by frayed seatbelt fabric was a tiny little girl, no more than 2 years old. Her pale pink jacket was torn, her cheeks ghost blue, her lashes frozen together. Her small hands clutched the dog's for even in unconsciousness, as if refusing to let go of the only warmth she had left. Marcus's breath caught, not from fear, but from a surge of alertness, so sharp it bordered on pain. The dog tried to lift its head. Its eyes, warm amber but dulled by exhaustion, met Marcus's with pleading urgency. Then it collapsed fully, its right hind leg smeared with dark, half-frozen blood. "Easy. I've got you," Marcus murmured, his voice steady despite the cold slicing through the doorway. He swept the little girl into his arms first. Her body was frighteningly light, as if cold had carved away everything but her shape. Marcus pressed her against his chest, trapping her hands in his gloved palm, shielding her small face from the wind. She gave a faint, brittle whimper, alive but fading. Inside the cabin, he laid her on his cot, stripped off her frozen outerwear, and wrapped her in a thermal blanket. He checked her airway, pulse, and pupils, movements smooth, decisive. Years of battlefield medicine guided his hands. He placed a heating pad under her back, rubbed her arms to stimulate circulation, then tucked her beneath his own heavy jacket to share body heat. Next came the dog. The Malinois lay on the floor, sides rising in shallow, painful waves. He was big, easily 85 pounds, with thick tan and black fur now tangled with ice. He looked around 5 or 6 years old. Strong, loyal, the kind of dog trained to obey even when the world turned violent. Marcus knelt beside him. "You did good, boy." He cut away the damage for around the wound, cleaned it with warm water mixed with antiseptic, and applied pressure bandages with practiced precision. The dog didn't fight. He endured with a soldier's stoicism, occasionally lifting his eyes to check on the child. Marcus felt something tug inside him. Dedication like this didn't come from instinct. It came from love, training, and a bond forged from trust. He placed a folded blanket beneath the Malinois and lit the cast-iron stove, feeding it wood until the cabin glowed with steady warmth. Hours passed in a blur of monitoring vitals, adjusting blankets, preparing warm sugar water for the girl to sip when she stirred. The blizzard roared on, but inside the cabin, fragile life was slowly knitting itself back together. Just before dawn, the little girl exhaled a soft sigh. Her color improved. The dog's breathing deepened, no longer rapid with panic. And yet, Marcus felt it. That tight coil of unease settling in his chest. Children and trained canines did not appear in the middle of a blizzard without a reason. Something was out there. Something that had driven them through the darkness straight into his door. He looked at the child, then at the dog, and for the first time in months, he felt the mission change. The storm finally eased into a fragile gray morning, the kind where the world felt half woken and half frozen. The cabin stove crackled softly, spreading thin layers of warmth against the cold that clung to the windows like frost-painted veils. Marcus Sullivan sat on the edge of his cot, watching the small rise and fall of the little girl's chest. Lily's cheeks had regained a faint flush, not the ghost blue that terrified him hours before. He leaned closer as her lashes fluttered, her eyes, soft hazel, glazed with disorientation, opened just long enough for a breathy whisper to slip out. "Car crash? Mommy? Daddy?" The words were broken shards, but they hit him with sharper force than any winter wind. Before he could speak, Lily's eyes drifted shut again, her small fingers relaxing around the fold of his jacket. Marcus exhaled slowly. He had seen trauma in every shape, soldiers, civilians, entire villages torn apart. But there was something about the fragility of a child's voice, especially one whispering out of the edge of survival, that lodged itself deeper than any battlefield memory. Beside the stove, Ranger pushed himself upright on unsteady legs. The Belgian Malinois' tan and black coat was still damp from thawing snow. The fur around his bandaged leg puffed slightly from dried antiseptic, but his eyes were sharp now, burning with alert intelligence. He paced from the door to the window, tail stiff, chest low, letting out small, anxious whines. "Easy, boy," Marcus murmured. "You brought her here. I know you're not done yet." Ranger pressed his nose against the gap in the shutters and growled softly at something only he could sense buried in the trees. A knot tightened in Marcus's gut. Whatever pushed this canine through the storm hadn't ended at his doorstep. He stood, grabbed his handheld radio, and switched channels until the static thinned enough to call out, "Harper Chun, this is Sullivan. Do you copy?" A moment passed, then a crackled reply. "Copy. I'm close enough for signal. Just say the word." Relief flickered through him. Harper Chin had been a combat medic in the Army before becoming a search and rescue specialist for the U.S. Forest Service. At 29, she had the calm presence of someone who had pulled more than one life back from the brink. She was petite but strong from years in rugged terrain, with warm tan skin and black hair, usually tied in a no-nonsense braid. Her dark brown eyes held both precision and compassion, traits honed in field hospitals and mountain rescues alike. Marcus gave her the location. 3 to 4 miles north. Girls hypothermic, but stable. Canines injured. I could use your hands. I'm on foot, Harper answered. Snow's too deep for anything else. Give me a little over an hour. true to her word, after an hour and a half, given the snowpack and steep terrain. Marcus heard the crunch of boots outside. When he opened the door, Harper stood there wrapped in a forest green rescue jacket dusted with frost. Her breath fogged in the air, her cheeks flushed in the climb, but her expression carried unwavering focus. "Show me the girl," she said simply, stepping inside. Harper moved with steady, practiced competence. She knelt beside Lily, checked her temperature, her pulse, the coloration of her fingertips, and gently coaxed a few sips of warm electrolyte solution into her mouth. When Ranger limped over, she gave the dog a soft nod. "Well, aren't you a miracle?" she whispered, inspecting his bandaged leg. "You brought her through that storm." Ranger thumped his tail once, then immediately turned to window again, staring outward as if the forest itself were calling him back. Harper looked at Marcus. "He's unsettled. He wants a return." "I know." Marcus pulled on his outer layers, buckling his vest and checking his sidearm. "And I think whatever happened out there isn't finished." Harper's gaze lingered on his face, reading more than he said. "You're going after it." Marcus nodded. "Stay with Lily. Keep the stove hot. Radio me every 10 minutes. "I will." She placed a reassuring hand on Lily's blanket. "Go." Ranger was already at the door, muscles taut despite the injury. Marcus grabbed his pack, first aid kit, rope, ration, spare magazine, knife, thermal flare, and slung it over his shoulder. He stepped outside into the pale morning cold. "Lead on, Ranger." The dog took off immediately, not fast, but deliberate, limping with purpose, weaving through snow bursts like he was following an invisible lifeline. They moved down the slope, through groves of pine hunched beneath the night snowfall, over ridges where the wind carved hard edges into the drifts. Marcus kept pace, scanning every sound, the pop of settling ice, the murmur of distant wind, the faint echo of something heavier he couldn't quite place. The wilderness felt too quiet, like the mountains were holding their breath. Halfway down a rise, Ranger stopped suddenly. His ears pricked. A low growl rumbled deep in his chest. "What is it?" Marcus whispered. The dog turned his head toward the deeper woods, eyes locked on something unseen, then barked once, sharp and urgent, before plunging ahead. Marcus followed. Branches whipped past, snow exploding beneath their boots and paws. The forest opened into a narrow ravine, and far below lay a dark, mangled shape that sent cold through Marcus's bones. A vehicle, an SUV, crushed, half buried in snow and debris. His heartbeat quickened, not from fear, but from the sudden electric clarity of what this meant. Lily hadn't whispered nonsense. There had been an accident, and if Ranger brought her out alive, then someone else might still be out here. Marcus stepped closer to the edge, snow settling around his boots as he stared down the ravine, feeling with unmistakable certainty that this was only the beginning. The wind thinned as Marcus Sullivan and Ranger descended halfway down the slope, but the cold still clung to the air like a warning. Snow lay heavy on the branches, muting sound and turning the world into a pale maze. Marcus moved with deliberate steps, boots crunching through layers of ice, his gaze sweeping the terrain with the precision of years spent navigating hostile ground. Ranger led decisively, the Belgian Malinois' injured leg causing a slight hitch in his gait. Yet his determination never faltered. His nose hovered inches above the snow, pausing only when he caught a trace of something. Fear, gasoline, metal, or the unmistakable scent of human blood. The ravine opened suddenly below them. Marcus stopped at the top ridge, breath catching in a brief, controlled exhale. The black SUV lay crushed near the base of the slope, the vehicle half buried in white powder and shards of broken pine. Its frame twisted unnaturally, as though a giant hand had wrung it like cloth. He crouched, studying the scene, not with panic, but with calculation. Years of experience taught him that wreckage always told the truth if one knew how to listen. Ranger barked once, sharp and urgent, and bounded downhill. Marcus followed. When he reached the vehicle, he immediately knew this was no weather-induced accident. The snow around the SUV bore scorched patches, small, circular blasts that left charred metal exposed beneath the tail end. Marcus brushed loose snow away from the undercarriage. The burn pattern was tight, controlled, a shaped charge. A small bomb designed not to obliterate the vehicle, but to force catastrophe, to break steering, rupture balance, and send the car over the cliff in a way that could be written off as loss of control on icy roads. Inside the crumpled SUV, traces of the family remained. A child's car seat thrown sideways, its latch torn apart. A pink mitten stuck beneath the front console. A trail of small blood droplets leading from the shattered passenger window to the snow outside. He saw the frayed ends of a seatbelt strap, edges rough, torn not by metal but by teeth. Ranger had fought to drag Lily free. "Good boy," Marcus murmured. Ranger nosed toward a patch of snow a few feet from the wreck. Marcus followed the dog's stare. They're clear as ink strokes on paper, were drag marks where someone had pulled themselves away from the wreck on elbows or knees. The indentations in the snow were uneven, suggesting injuries. Next to them were smears of blood in thin, desperate lines. But it was the footprints that stole Marcus's breath for half a second. 3 separate sets of heavy boot prints. Large, deep, recent. Too fresh to belong to rescuers. Too organized to be hikers. Marcus's jaw tightened. He scanned the tree line, posture shifting from investigator calm to combat readiness. He adjusted the grip on his rifle. The change subtle but absolute. Ranger suddenly growled, a low, throaty vibration that signaled danger before Marcus heard anything. Then voices, muffled, tense, moving in their direction. Marcus ducked behind a downed tree trunk, eyes narrowing. Ranger crouched beside him, ears pinned back, body trembling, not with fear but anticipation. 3 men emerged from a far side of the ravine. They were dressed for cold weather operations, dark insulated jackets, tactical boots, gloves built for grip. Their faces were half covered by gaiters pulled up to their noses. But what mattered most was unmistakable. They were armed. The lead man carried an AR platform rifle against his chest, moving with the easy confidence of someone trained. He was tall, broad-shouldered, the stubble along his jaw shadowing strong, angular features. His eyes swept the wreckage with cold precision, as if checking for survivors he hoped not to find. The second man was shorter, wiry, with a sharp, twitchy energy. His eyes darted constantly, up the trees, across the snow, back to the SUV, like he expected something to jump out at him. The third man, bulkier and slower in his steps, had a weather-beaten brow and a deep scar running diagonally from temple to jaw, a line that suggested a life of violence and unfinished fights. Marcus memorized their profiles automatically. Details were intel. Intel was survival. The tall one spoke first. "Tracks say they got out. At least 2 of them." The wiry one answered, voice tight. "Boss wants everything clean before nightfall. Witnesses, especially the kid, are the priority." A beat of silence. Then the scar man muttered, "Kid or not, if they're breathing, we finish it." Marcus felt the cold settle deeper inside him. These weren't opportunists. These were professionals, men who had been sent to eliminate survivors. He waited until the trio spread out, searching the perimeter. Ranger released a low bark, a warning. Marcus moved. He shifted from his cover, sliding behind a thicker trunk. The first shot he fired wasn't into flesh. It hit the ground in front of the tall man. A deliberate warning shot meant to break their formation. "What the wiry man shouted. Their reaction was immediate and coordinated. The scarred man fired into the trees, bullets shredding bark inches from Marcus's shoulder. Marcus rolled. Returning fire was short, controlled bursts that forced him behind cover. Ranger lunged out as one man tried to flank, teeth bared, aiming for the man's gun arm. The man yelled, stumbling back, firing blindly into snow. Marcus seized a moment and shot the weapon from his hand, sending it skidding across the ice. The tall man cursed. "Fall back. Now!" A smoke canister hit the snow, erupting into a thick white cloud that mingled with the storm's leftovers. In a matter of seconds, all 3 figures vanished into the forest, the retreat audible only by pounding footsteps fading through the pines. Ranger growled once more, then sniffed the air with urgency. Marcus let his breath out slowly. The fight had been brief, but it told him everything he needed. These weren't random predators. They were cleaning up a job. He bent to check Ranger. No new injuries, only adrenaline shaking through the dog's muscles. Then Ranger trotted to the overturned snowbank beside the SUV and dug furiously. Marcus crouched beside him. In moments, Ranger unearthed a small blue scarf, lightly scented with child shampoo and smoke. Lilies. Marcus tightened his grip on the scarf. Lead the way, he whispered. And Ranger did, bounding toward the deeper forest, toward whatever truth lay waiting beyond the reach of the broken ravine. Snow whispered underfoot as Marcus Sullivan and Ranger pushed deeper into the woods, the ravine fading behind them like a wound closing under falling flakes. The forest thickened, pines leaning inward as if guarding secrets. Ranger limped but did not slow, his breath puffing out in determined bursts of white steam. Marcus kept pace beside him, senses drawn tight like a bowstring. They crossed a narrow creek frozen in mid-flow, climbed a rise where the wind scoured the ground bare, and descended into a sheltered hollow. That was where Ranger stopped abruptly, ears angled forward, nose quivering. Marcus followed his gaze. Two figures lay half hidden beneath a cluster of low firs, a desperate attempt at shelter. A man and a woman. Alive, but barely. Marcus approached cautiously. The man stirred first, groaning as he attempted to push himself upright. He looked to be in his early 40s, with sandy brown hair matted by sweat and snow. His face had the rugged handsomeness of someone used to outdoor work. Strong cheekbones, a square jaw shadowed by uneven stubble, and deep lines carved by worry and exhaustion. His eyes, a pale blue, flickered with pain yet still carried the alertness of a man who refused to give up. The woman beside him was slighter, mid-30s. Long, dark blonde hair tangled around her face like strands of brittle straw. Her skin was pale from shock, and freckles dusted her cheeks beneath streaks of dirt and blood. Despite her delicate appearance, her expression held a quiet resilience, like someone who had endured storms long before this one. She pressed a trembling hand to her left shoulder, which hung lower than the right in a way Marcus recognized instantly. A dislocation. "Ethan Cole?" Marcus asked quietly. The man blinked, barely nodding. "My wife, Sophie." His voice cracked from cold and dehydration. Marcus quickly assessed their injuries. Ethan had fractured ribs. His breath came shallow, his torso stiff. Sophie's shoulder was indeed dislocated, and she bore a cut above her eyebrow that had frozen partially shut. Both were hypothermic, their clothes stiff with ice. Ranger nosed Sophie gently, then sat at her side, refusing to move. Marcus knelt. "I'm going to help you, but we need to move. Now." With careful, practiced movements, he relocated Sophie's shoulder. She bit down hard on her lip, her eyes squeezing shut, but she didn't cry out, her strength surprising him. He wrapped Ethan's torso with a compression bandage, stabilizing the ribs enough so he could stand. He distributed heat packs, made them sip what little warm water he carried, and offered to spare gloves. "Can you walk?" Marcus asked. Ethan straightened slowly, wincing. "We'll manage." "We have to." Marcus nodded, slung Ethan's arm over his shoulder, and led them through the woods. A quarter-mile north, the silhouette of a small abandoned ranger cabin emerged, half buried in snow, its roof sagging slightly beneath the weight of winter's past. The place was old, rough-hewn logs, frost creeping over window edges, wind whistling through warped grooves. But it was shelter. Inside, dust and cold greeted them like ghosts. The cabin was single-roomed, with a trap door in the floor that Marcus immediately recognized as a firewood cellar. Small, dark, cramped, but hidden. "Sit," Marcus instructed. Ethan and Sophie lowered themselves to the floor, exchanging a look that spoke of fear, hope, and thin, fraying cord tying the two together. Marcus lit a lantern, letting soft gold light spill across their faces. "Tell me what happened." The couple exchanged a glance before Sophie spoke, her voice trembling but firm. "We work for Clearwater Health Systems, an elder services corporation." She paused, swallowing. "I'm an audit supervisor. Ethan is in IT security." Ethan leaned forward, wincing at the movement. 2 months ago, we found discrepancies in their Medicare billing system, charges for exams that never happened, hospice claims for people who were still alive, even medical equipment billed to seniors who'd passed away years earlier. Sophie's eyes filled with fear and anger mingled together. Clearwater wasn't just inflating bills. They were funneling the excess funds through a laundering network. The street name we heard whispered was Ghostwire. Ethan rubbed his temples. We gathered proof. Too much proof. We handed everything to the FBI. They arranged a quiet transport with the U.S. Marshals. We weren't supposed to stop anywhere, not even for gas. Sophie shivered. But they got to us. Someone on the inside. Someone who knew our route. A deputy sheriff, Ethan muttered. He took the SUV into the station garage for a routine winter check. He must have planted the device under the axle. Marcus tightened his jaw. A directed blast. Small enough to hide, strong enough to send you off the road. Sophie nodded, tears finally escaping. We fought our way out of the SUV. Ranger pulled Lily free. Everything after that is cold and pain. Ranger whined softly under the lantern's glow, as if confirming every word. Marcus rose, pulled his satellite phone from his vest, and dialed a secure frequency. Static hissed before a clipped voice responded. Commander Blake speaking. Marcus stood straighter. Sir, this is Sullivan. I have 2 surviving witnesses in the Clearwater case. Car was hit with a shaped charge. Arm cleaners already on site. A pause. Then Blake's tone hardened. Copy. This is bigger than we expected. You need to hold position. Reinforcements inbound. ETA 3 hours. Yes, sir, Marcus said. Sullivan, Blake added, voice lower. Do not let those witnesses fall. The call ended. Marcus worked fast. He braided fishing line with bits of metal and sleigh bells he scavenged from a cabin's storage chest, making a series of perimeter alarms strung between trees. He blocked the windows with stacked firewood and loose stone, turning the walls into makeshift cover. He swept the snow across footprints to obscure their presence. Ethan and Sophie watched, half awed, half terrified. Get into the cellar, Marcus said. It's cramped, but it'll hide you. Sophie squeezed his arm. Thank you. Ethan hesitated. If something happens to us, Lily is all that matters. Marcus met his gaze. Nothing has happened to any of you. They climbed into the cellar. Marcus replaced the hatch, covering it with a worn rug and a toppled chair. Ranger positioned himself at the door, muscles tense despite the pain, eyes fixed on the swirling darkness outside. Marcus clicked off the lantern. The forest pressed in. Somewhere out there, the men from the ravine were regrouping, and the storm, though quieter now, seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Night fell like a slow descent of black velvet over the Cascade Mountains, swallowing what little warmth the day had spared. The forest around the abandoned ranger cabin seemed to tighten, as if drawing breath before a storm. Not of snow, but of men. Marcus Sullivan crouched behind a barricade of logs and stones he'd stacked earlier, his rifle angled toward the south tree line. Ranger stood beside him, body tense, ears alert, the dim lantern glow catching the dried blood on the Malinois' shoulder fur. The dog's amber eyes flicked between the forest and the sealed trap door where Ethan and Sophie Cole waited below. The world was too quiet, too still. Then, far off, a sound knifed through the quiet, a howl, not from a wolf, but from a trained bloodhound, low and vibrating with purpose. Then another, and another. Marcus's jaw tightened. They brought trackers. Ranger growled, recognizing the telltale baying of hunting dogs. The Malinois stepped forward, bracing himself as though preparing to shield the cabin by sheer will. From somewhere beyond the first row of pines, faint voices drifted in, carried by the wind. Spread out. They're close. Watch the tree line. Target still active. Dogs caught the girl's scent and the man's blood. Cabins ahead. Marcus peered through the scope. They came like a ripple of shadows. 20 armed men, splitting into coordinated formations. Leading them were 3 handlers, each gripping the leashes of bloodhounds bred for cold weather tracking. One handler, a broad-chested man with a shaved head and a thick red beard, carried himself with the confidence of someone who had hunted people before. His eyes were a cold, washed-out green, and a faded tattoo of a rattlesnake coiled around his neck. His name Marcus didn't know, but his type was unmistakable. Ex-military, dishonorably discharged, hired muscle without conscience. Behind him, 2 younger handlers struggled to restrain their dogs, thin men, both with sharp noses, pale eyes, and the jittery energy of methamphetamine users. Their speech was rapid, erratic, lacking discipline. It was a mismatched squad, yet dangerous. Desperate men were often the most unpredictable. Marcus exhaled slowly, steadying his breath the way Marine training had drilled into him. "Come on," he whispered to Ranger. "Let them make the first mistake." The moment didn't take long. A twig snapped on the northern side of the cabin. Marcus swung his rifle, spotting a gunman creeping forward. He was built stocky, maybe mid-30s, with a thick winter coat and a ski mask pulled low over his face. His breath fogged the air as he raised his pistol toward the window. Marcus fired one controlled shot. The man's weapon spun from his hand with a metallic clatter, and he fell backward, screaming and clutching his wrist. Ranger barked sharply, the sound echoing through the trees. The camp exploded into motion. Contact! Contact at the cabin! Move! Move! Suppressive fire. A hail of bullets ripped into the front wall, splintering wood and sending shards raining across the room. Marcus rolled behind a beam just as rounds tore through where his head had been a heartbeat earlier. Dust and shredded bark filled the air, mixing with smoke from the lantern. Ranger charged toward the window, snarling, but Marcus caught him by the harness. "Not yet. Stay with me." The bloodhounds surged forward, pulling their handlers until the men nearly tripped. They circled the cabin, sniffing at the snow, baying ferociously. Their cries echoed like hunting horns through the valley. Marcus tossed a flashbang out the window. A loud crack split the night, followed by panic shouting. A handler collapsed, hands over his eyes. One of the bloodhounds yelped, stunned but unharmed. The other two dogs continued their frenzied search, their noses driving them toward the cabin's back entrance. Gunfire cracked from all sides. Bullets punched into the walls, sending insulation drifting through the air like dying snowflakes. Marcus could hear Ethan below the trapdoor, breathing hard, whispering for Sophie to stay quiet. It reminded him what was at stake. He moved from cover to cover, firing controlled bursts. Each shot calculated, never wasted. One gunman fell near the east pines. Another dug behind a log, clutching his thigh. Ranger, barking viciously, leaped through the small front gap Marcus had carved earlier and lunged at a man trying to flank them. The Malinois latched onto the attacker's coat sleeve, dragging him through the snow before the man kicked free and stumbled back into the dark. Then the cabin shook. A grenade rolled under the outer log wall. "Down!" Marcus yelled. He grabbed Ranger and dug behind the thickest part of the barricade. The blast tore open the side wall, sending wood flying. A hot, sharp sting slashed across Marcus's ribs, shrapnel embedding deep. He gritted his teeth, tasting iron. Ranger staggered, whining. A bullet had grazed his shoulder, leaving a streak of blood darkening his fur. "Stay with me, boy." Marcus rasped. Outside, the attackers closed in. The red-bearded handler roared orders. "Finish it. He's hit. Pushing now." The gunmen surged forward, emboldened by the damage. Their footsteps pounded the snow, their shadows lengthening to the broken wall as they approached. Marcus felt his strength falter, warm blood soaking his side. His magazine was nearly empty. Ranger stood pressed against him, trembling yet unbroken. The dog looked up at him as though asking a question. "What now?" Marcus swallowed, steadying himself. 3 minutes, he whispered. "Hold for 3 more minutes." He wasn't sure if he believed it, but he had to. Gunmen swarmed the cabin entrance. Marcus fired the last rounds of his rifle, forcing them to scatter. He dropped the empty weapon and drew his sidearm, breathing through the pain. The forest lit up, bullets, muzzle flashes, the furious baying of dogs. The cabin was collapsing around them, barely holding. Then a sound tore through the night, a deep, thunderous rhythm that vibrated through the ground. Rotors, helicopter rotors. Spotlights sliced open the darkness, bathing the forest in harsh beams. A voice boomed through loudspeakers. "Drop your weapons. This is Marine Force Recon. You are surrounded." Panic rippled through the attackers. Some fired wildly at the sky. Others ran. A few dropped to their knees in surrender. Then pairs of operators descended from the helicopter via ropes. Dark figures moving with precision, weapons already aimed. A second helicopter circled the perimeter, cutting off escape routes. Snow erupted under the force of the landing's searchlights. The battle was over in minutes. 10 men were dragged from the snow in restraints, snarling or whimpering. 10 more were pinned under medical teams, wounded but alive. Inside the shattered cabin, Marcus slumped against the wall as 2 Marine medics rushed in. He kept one hand on Ranger, who had collapsed beside him, still conscious but exhausted. "Easy, Sullivan. We've got you," one medic said, a tall black man in his late 20s named Corporal Andre Williams, who had a calm voice and steady hands. Williams pressed bandages against Marcus's wounds while calling for extraction. The trap door creaked open. Sophie and Ethan emerged, shaking, helped by 2 operators. "You're safe," Marcus managed to say. Sophie burst into quiet tears. Ethan squeezed Marcus's shoulder despite the man's injury. "You saved us." Marcus looked down at Ranger. "He saved you," he whispered. Weeks passed. Clearwater Health Systems was exposed publicly. Ghostwire's laundering network collapsed. The deputy sheriff who planted the bomb was arrested and charged. Ranger received the National K-9 Valor Medal. Photos of the once-wounded retired dog lying on a hospital bed beside Marcus, both recovering, both alive, flooded the news. The country fell in love with the Malinois, who carried a child through a storm. Lily, now safe with her parents, visited often. She toddled down hospital halls, carrying bags of homemade chocolate chip cookies her mother baked, holding stuffed animals to loan to Ranger. Her drawings, crooked houses, big mountains, a tall man with a blue coat, and a dog with a bright tail, decorated Marcus's room. Winter remained cold in the Cascade Mountains. But for the first time in a long time, Marcus didn't feel the frost settle in his bones. Some storms didn't freeze a man. Some storms taught him.